3, 2, live.
Farts. Old farts. 2 old farts. Steve and Dave. Sometimes you find a diamond in the rough. Not this time, though. This is just rough. 2 old farts. There is no better waste of time. Two guys. 2 old guys. A lot of BS and more drivel than you can shake a stick at. Steve and Dave. God help us.
I'm still trying to figure out what God that is. I know there's many gods, blah, blah, blah. But today, Dave, it's
today, I think it's going to be the god of tobacco, I think, today, Stephen. But,
well, no, that's just terrible. It should be it's because tobacco, it's really the god of cigars, because that is like, that's one of my vices. Yeah. Actually, scotch and cigars to me is a food group. So having this guest on, I'm very excited because we're going to discuss at least one of my food groups, which is cigars. Yeah. And I know you are fascinated by cigars, so this is going to be exciting for you.
Well, so. I thought the best thing to do is just to start the show off for anybody who, we're not endorsing smoking. We're not sponsored by.
Oh, no, we're endorsing smoking cigars. Don't even start with that crap.
Well, you are personally, but the show isn't.
Right.
Everything comes with a health risk, like crossing the roads. So I just wanted to say that because somebody might even see this show in America and then they'll get all upset about it, or in the UK, and you have to be 18 plus to see the show and all the rest of it. So if you don't want anybody to watch this and because it's smoking related or listen to it, then thank you very much. Come back on another show.
And get the hell out of here. Now we're going to start our show. Would you like to introduce our guest?
No, I think this is going to be a complete love-in. So I'll let you do it, and I should just sit here looking
and look pretty. You're just going to sit there and look pretty.
Well, that'll be a hard job.
I'm still waiting for you to be naked on the bare rug behind the fireplace so we can take the picture for the calendar. That's all I'm saying.
Under this exterior, I'm naked.
There you go. Thank you for sharing. And now I can't get that out of my head. Reza is our guest today, and he is a friend of Brown Car Guy. And Brown Car Guy, as you know, was on our show a few weeks ago. And he said, when we were talking about cigars, he had a friend. And this is the friend. And this gentleman is a cigar aficionado. Probably knows more about cigars than I do. So I'm excited about that. We're going to talk a little about cigars, maybe some scotch, and then we'll probably talk about cars. So it should be an interesting hour show.
Okay. Right.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen.
There he is.
Hey, how you doing? How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you very much for a very nice intro. Actually, aficionado gets thrown around a lot. I'm an absolute cigar amateur who really enjoys smoking cigars. So I'll humble myself now and let you talk me up later on.
He knows everything there is to know. He's written many cigar books and whatnot. No, I'm just, I'm talking you up. It's what we do.
The thing is, how do you become a professional? That's the thing. Yeah, that's what people are going to ask now. If you're an amateur.
If you want a real answer to that, I think you have to start spending more than £300 or £400 per stick, and maybe you can start calling yourself a professional, albeit with a lot of money. But you've got to that stage where you're willing to bet your wallet on what you believe in, and that I would have to say there's a professional cigar smoker there. Then I haven't got to that stage yet, but maybe.
I will say this though. Whether it's a $5 stick or a €5 stick or like David Mink has that solid gold, the gold cigar stick. A friend actually got it and I smoked it. And it was just the novelty of smoking a cigar wrapped in gold leaf. But I was thinking to myself, okay, I like your Red Band better than I like this one. This one was just didn't do anything for me. I don't think it's really the price. It's really the structure and the aging. There's so much that goes into it. And I think a lot of people that don't smoke cigars, they'll go in and they'll say, oh, that cigar is $50 or €50. And they'll be like, that's got to be good. Not necessarily. Some of the best cigars are like $8, if you will, or €8. So, and I think that's a misconception.
I've been now smoking cigars solidly for about 13, 14 years.
Right.
And I had a preconceived notion. There was a reason why I started smoking cigars. I had a preconceived notion as to why people smoke cigars. And really, I hope I've wisened up to the fact that you have all sorts of different people who smoke cigars for different reasons. Some people will smoke a cigar because it makes them look good. Some people will smoke a cigar because it makes them feel good. Some people will smoke a cigar just for the conviviality and to sit around with other people who are smoking cigars. Then you've got your, as you said, professional cigar smokers who can then start talking about the various leaves that go into a cigar, the cigar making process, the aroma, the amount of smoke a cigar blows off, and all that kind of stuff. And I've had to little bit appreciate, and I've quietened down a little bit. I used to be a little bit of a screaming, shouting young man, and after 50, I've calmed down a little bit now. I've decided that there are so many reasons why people smoke cigars, and the price of the cigar, generally, to me, as far as I have seen, you can kind of work out when someone is spending $8 a stick or £8 a stick here in the UK, all the way up to 500. And I've seen cigars sell for £550. These Cohiba special editions. You can kind of work out better what kind of person is smoking the cigar depending on what price they're paying and how regularly they're smoking those cigars.
Right.
So, for example, today I'm going to my old favorite, and thank you for giving me permission to smoke during your program. I'm going to my regular Camacho creamy everyday kind of cigar where you can pick it up. It's a very easy cigar to smoke. It's relatively mild, flavorsome. This is like almost one a day kind of cigar. But there's an ease to it, and there's a taste, and there's a balanced flavor, and all that kind of stuff. So you meet people who want to put on a beautiful suit and want to smoke a cigar because it evokes something for them.
Right.
Or they want to buy into a certain group of people or a certain lifestyle. I do it for totally different, well, not totally different, but I have my own reason why I got into cigars. And like many young men, I used to steal cigars from my father's cabinet when I was about 12 years old.
Nice.
And that's how it started. But
so now you'll have to tell us the reason, but my go-to on a daily basis, I have two. I have CAO Brazilian Amazon, which is a big full body, like 60 by like 56. It's just like it's a nice hour and a half. I call it a mini holiday. So whether I'm stressed or I want to read something, or I just want everyone to leave me the you know what alone, I go out there. And unfortunately, because in Austin right now, for the people in Europe, it is 0 Celsius, or in America, it's 32. So I would be joining him with a cigar right now, but I don't want to dress up as Nanook of the North and be freezing while I'm talking to everybody, because I'm in the house. And if I smoke a cigar in the house, apparently I get divorced. So and the attorneys have told me to avoid divorce by all means. So
and you're right. I've been divorced twice.
See, there you go.
So I hold
so cigars are an expensive habit, then, gentlemen.
Yes, they are. But so I go with the Brazilian Amazon, and I like CAO because it's this very full body, and I like that in the morning or the afternoon. I'm a full body guy. And then the other one I do is the Beast by Gherkin. And the Beast is another full body. And then I use, like, for special occasions, like a Thursday. There's like certain Davidoffs I like. There's certain Cohibas, and there's a difference between the U.S., what you buy in the U.S. and the Cuban Cohibas. And it's, it's just a nice, and if you go to a cigar lounge, it's a great equalizer. When I lived in Montana, and I've told the story, there's a bar. I love the name of this bar. It was called Liquor in the Front, Poker in the Back. And I wish I was making it up. It's in Missoula, Montana. And you'd be sitting at the bar or playing poker in the back room or whatever, and people would be smoking cigars. And what was interesting is you could be talking to a real cowboy that was punching doggies, which means branding cows that make $300 a week. And you could also be talking to some guy that was worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
And a cigar, whether it's $8 or £8 or it's $500 or pounds, is the great equalizer, because it's nobody cares how much you spent. It's a brotherhood. And I think that's also, when I go to a cigar lounge, I enjoy that part. But I would say 90% of the time I smoke a cigar, I'm just on my own. It's just a very chill experience.
Is it
Yeah.
is it for you? And this is really more interesting for me perhaps than it is for you.
Right.
Why do you, at essence, smoke a cigar? And I don't know. By the way, David, I don't know. Did you mention? Do you smoke cigar? You didn't sound as if you smoke cigars. I think the Dutch like to have a nice pipe in their hands, but
yeah, but they don't always put tobacco in it.
always.
But yeah, I mean, I used to smoke. Let's just leave it in the middle.
Okay.
Before we get lawyers all over us. Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, I want to backtrack a little bit. You use the terminology stick. I take it that that's like cigar talk for cigars. So a stick is a cigar. For all those people who thought that we were trying to light a fire. Reza, what about you in the UK? Where are there other places you go in the UK? I mean,
you catch me at a full circle moment. So I started smoking cigars in cigar lounges around 2012 for all sorts of reasons. I smoke a cigar more than anything. It evokes the memory of my father who died 23 years ago. But for more than anything, that's why I smoke a cigar.
Okay.
There's a certain aroma. There's a certain aroma memory that I associate with that. It takes me back to the 80s, which is where basically I'm stuck. Musically, I'm stuck. Fashion-wise, I'm stuck. I'm stuck in every single way somewhere between 1984 and 86. Okay. Do the maths, it's around 1985. But cigar lounges around 10, 12 years ago, I used to go to a very nice cigar lounge in London run by the Churchill Hotel. And they created a new cigar lounge where you could smoke, you could eat and drink. And those three things as a combined activity were an activity I enjoyed. And then I used to hit other cigar lounges in London. And as of today, they're almost to a penny. A brand new hotel opens, it needs to have a cigar lounge. So when I say I've gone full circle, I'm sitting in a very exclusive cigar lounge right now. It's my own, and this is where I smoke. And this is where I enjoy myself. And I can smoke any cigar, eat anything, drink anything. I've got audio, visual entertainment. I love smoking on my own. And it's kind of nice when it's elevated by a couple of friends who turn up and drink and smoke with me. But this is my cigar lounge. And I don't know if you've seen any of my Instagram posts. Most of them take place here these days.
Yeah, I've seen your Instagram. So yeah, so basically, it's, if you will, I'm assuming it's a man cave in the house.
It's the cave thing is very interesting. The cave thing is also very interesting because I'm kind of obsessive about anything I get involved in, whether it's art or cars or cigars. I kind of have this slightly old man mentality of going down the history route of why is this way.
Yep.
And from whatever I've read about cigars and how and when people started smoking cigars and the smoking of tobacco, etc., it was all about lighting a fire and controlling a fire. And you noticed earlier, I had to light a fire to light this fire.
Right.
So as I don't know, somewhere in my subconscious, there's some sort of archetype or something like that, where as a man, I like to control this little fire burning at the sort of almost 2 or 3 inches away from my mouth, and I'm in control of it. Yep. If you know what I mean.
I totally understand it. I do the same thing.
So the cave thing, back to prehistoric man, maybe.
Right.
Maybe the cave is a relevant
term
description.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's and people that don't smoke cigars, I don't think they really understand there's an art to it. You know, like I remember a friend of mine said, "Let me try one of your cigars," and I gave it to him, and he's trying to smoke. I'm like, "Dude, it's not a cigarette. Like the idea is not to smoke this thing that's, you know, bigger than you are, and smoke it in 3 minutes. It is for you to enjoy it. It's the pleasure of it. It's the you know, the aroma. It's the flavors." And when I first started to smoke, I had to learn about that. I mean, I did it properly. It's just the aromas I liked. I couldn't figure out how to get the flavor. And then as I started smoking back in the 1300s. So for me, it's been a while. So, but when I started, it was
I identify. Yes.
There you go. So it's like the aromas and whatever. Actually, So when I graduated university, my grandfather took us out, and my grandfather was the one. I had my first cigar, and he used to smoke cigars when I was a kid, and then he took us out for scotch, cigars, and steak. So
Well,
I
there you
think,
go.
all right, what else are you going to do when you graduate university?
That's
So
your manhood has arrived.
they're 21 years old. It's like, here's your cigar, here's your scotch, and here's a steak. I'm like, ooh, cool. And so from that point on, I was hooked, and it was nothing more than it relaxed me. And it was something like, even to this day, like if we have a big steak, and I don't care if we eat it at 10 o'clock at night, I have to have a cigar after. I had a steak, I want my cigar. So
in a world that's going in all sorts of directions with regards gender issues,
right.
Let me say this: it was a manly activity, a visceral, manly bonding activity, solo activity, however you want to call it. It was a manly activity, and actually, I'm sure you know, Stephen, that these days cigar smoking is actually very fashionable amongst the ladies as well.
Yes.
I don't know. I think it's kind of nascent. I think the ladies in the last 3 or 4 years have got clued up to it. And I'm on Instagram. So from an Instagram and social media perspective, it looks like a sort of an Instagrammable kind of lifestyle activity rather than necessarily something that people just genuinely enjoy doing. And you could say that about a lot of things, whether it's cars or art or watch, whatever it may be. Instagram and social media seems to have distorted how people want to show their lifestyle.
Right.
But the ladies are very much getting involved. And one of the things which kind of I sort of subconsciously knew, but I actually saw last year, at the beginning of last year, about a year ago, I was in the Dominican Republic at one of the major cigar festivals. It's called Pro Cigar.
Yep.
And which lasted about a week or so. And I went around the various, so the Dominican Republic is very well set up for to promote its cigar and tobacco industry, two separate things. So they grow tobacco, and they ripen tobacco leaves, and then they make cigars, and they also make the bands and the boxes. There's a whole industry in the Dominican Republic, almost going head to head with the Cuban industry almost next door. And the one thing that was remarkable for me, I remember asking one of the farm owners the question, is 99% of the farm workers, 99% of the leaf sorters, 99% of the cigar rollers, the band putters, whatever that name may be, are ladies.
Yes.
And so my question was, why? And the response was very, very interesting. The ladies have a better eye on control.
I can
on
see
quality
that.
on quality control.
Quality control.
Quality control. Whereas this is not to be sort of gender biased in any way, but it is the science behind these things. A man will pick up a leaf, and even if it's got a slight notch in it, he will bind it into his cigar. The lady will tend not to do that.
Oh wow!
She would be a more discerning worker,
right?
Because she will see it from the customer's perspective. And I was told, under no uncertain terms, especially in the Dominican Republic, 99% of this industry is female driven.
That's awesome.
Which is not something that's really out there, and people tend not to promote cigars or cigar smoking for the obvious reasons. But people such as us, who are sort of immersed in that industry, we get to see this. It was a moment of enlightenment to me. I mean, if someone told me that all Ferraris, 99% of Ferraris, are made by ladies, it was that kind of light bulb moment.
Right. But to go to your point about women smoking cigars, in the 80s when I started, in the beginning it was men, and you would go, I would call the gentleman's club, not the strip club with the girl on the pole, but old school gentleman's club with the big leather chair, and you sit there and you smoke cigar. It was like, that was cool. And then all of a sudden, like towards the end of the 80s, they came out with like flavored cigars, and all the women were like, oh, I'm going to smoke a honey cigar. I'm going to smoke this. I'm going to smoke that. I'm like, why don't you just roll up a newspaper? Because it's the same thing, right? I understand you want to be cool, not so much. And then it died down for a little bit, and guys like us that smoke cigars, we just kept smoking cigars. Like so during the ebb and flow of cigars, we're still smoking cigars, right? It doesn't change. I still buy what I'm going to buy, and I smoke what I'm going to smoke, and try some new stuff. And then like the women will stop, and then all of a sudden there'll be this thing again where it's a resurgence where the women are now. We have to smoke cigars, and I'm like, oh, okay. So it seems for the women, it really ebbs and flows. What the latest celebrity is doing, and then for men, for lack of a better term, that are cigar guys, we just smoke cigars, whether it's one a day or 10 a day or whatever it is. We just smoke cigars regardless. Full stop. That's it. Don't care. And we're not taking into the. It makes me look like it's just I enjoy it. And really, at the end of the day, that's what it is. The guys who smoke it because they think they look cool or they do they're the ones who will go blow 200 pounds, if you will, on a stick and know nothing about it, nothing about the heritage or nothing about the stick or nothing about the construction of it or how it's made or whatever. And it's kind of a shame because it kind of diminishes the whole air of what a cigar really is, I think.
I used to.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
I'd just like to jump in because you said very, I think about 5 or so minutes ago, which kind of stuck in my mind. You said that in London hotels were, these smoking lounges were almost everywhere these days. So what does that entail in a smoking lounge? Is it also men only, or and why would a hotel do that? What sort of clientele are they trying to please?
So, talking about Central London, West End, the cliquey hotels, there's the Peninsula Hotel is opening sort of at the end of Hyde Park Corner, was about to open in a couple of months' time. It has a cigar lounge. Harrods has a cigar sampling area that I go to. They're called sampling lounges. The way this works is you have to buy the cigars on site and sample them there. And that's how you get around, essentially you're getting around the licensing for smoking indoors. And the fashion, there is a fashion element to this, which I kind of used to resent. I still resent in a certain ways. I personally think that cigar smoking is an activity that if you actually look back at the history of it, or if you go to the local, if you went to Cuba, for example, Dominican, you'll see an old lady sitting on a street corner smoking a cigar. Right. It's not a gentleman's necessarily activity. It's become known as that because it's a very capitalist activity. It was known for a capitalist as being a sort of the height of success is when you light a cigar. 30, 40 years ago, if you have, your child is born, you light a cigar. It's sort of a sample of success. And that element of success has, I think the hotels have bought into that. There's a sort of a suave sophistication associated with cigar smoking, a fashionability, a social media awareness that the hotels are buying into. And what they're finding is someone who can smoke even a 30, 40 pound cigar regularly is the kind of person that's going to come in and spend 20, 25 pounds on a cocktail, and he or she won't have one, he'll have 2 or 3. So if you go out in central London these days, even for a bite to eat, and this is post-COVID, you'll find everything is really expensive. You can drop £100 smoking a cigar and having a couple of cocktails. And that is a revenue generating exercise, is a fashionable exercise. And that's why, as I said, hotels, every brand new hotel seems to have a cigar smoking lounge. I walked past, well, I've done it many times, but the Ritz. Ritz has got a cigar lounge facing onto this, the windows face on the street. It's always empty. It's always empty. Maybe there's maybe 1 or 2 customers smoke in there from time to time, but it has to have one. So it's sort of a flag of necessity these days, and that's the way we view it. And I'm not sure how that's playing out in the rest of the world, but certainly in the UK and specifically in London, it's like that.
Well, in the US, they can't because, we're pansies over here. So you have to go to like a real cigar place or like a bar that serves less food than alcohol. It's a whole thing. But I will say when I was in the UK in the late 80s, my first Cuban is where I had it. And because we went to a restaurant, we had dinner, you know, and I'm smoking cigars, and it's like no big deal. And the guy comes by and he says he has the, you know, the alcohol cart, which I was like, ooh, nice. And then he had the dessert cart, and I was like, eh. And then he comes back with the cigar cart, and I was like, what? And I said, where can we smoke these? He's like, you can smoke it right here, sir. So we were like, okay. And so I had my first Cuban after dinner at a very nice restaurant in London, and I was like hooked. That even hooked me more that you could have like a cigar after dinner at the restaurant. And of course, you can't do that anymore. Unless you belong to, like in New York, it's like the Havana Club at the top of the Sixes, right? We can go there. But what's funny is I can sit in the lounge and have like finger food or even a steak, and I got my cigar there, but I can't go into the restaurant part and have a cigar. I can only have a cigar kind of in the lounge area, which is perfect. But still, you know, it lets you do that.
Yeah.
Well, there, I firmly believe that media and social media has played a big role in the last 10 years. Downton Abbey, for example,
right,
which I think the whole world saw. After dinner, the gentlemen retire to a room in their dinner jackets or in their evening wear, and they light a cigar and they have a drink.
Right.
And there is both a visceral activity of men getting the men getting together afterwards, and it's also an aristocratic activity.
Yeah.
And that marketing of cigars in the UK, very specifically, if you watch YouTube channels for David or for this Kirby Allison who appears here from the USA, he'll put a really nice suit on and go and sit with Eddie Sahakian and smoke a cigar. There's a certain branding there, and that branding, in my personal opinion, just like everything else, is to do with disproportionate marketing. At the end of the day, you're smoking dried leaves, and you're trying to extract oils from them and aroma from them at the end of the day.
Right.
But the marketing and the value for these relatively labor-intensive products is let's say disproportionate. The reason I use the word disproportionate is I feel it's totally unreasonable to pay £500 for a cigar. Right. Totally unreasonable in every single sense. Okay. And I think David referred to some of these cigars that were gold wrapped, or was that you?
No, that was me. David Mink had that gold leaf wrap one.
So I know I'm smoking a cigar right now, a Camacho, Connecticut, Toro size. I can't imagine that the actual value of this cigar is more than $2 or $3.
Right.
The price of this cigar is between 22 and 32 pounds.
Wow.
Okay, which is a bit like pizza. Pizza doesn't cost a few pence to make when economies of scale set in. But when you buy a pizza, it's 14, 15, 16, 20 pounds.
Right.
It's flour and water and a few ingredients on top. And so the disproportionate marketing that is done to associate cigars with a very extravagant, very upper class, middle to upper class, I'm doing so well and I'm wearing a Gives and Hawke suit from Savile Row. That marketing, essentially, we've got tobacconists who are behaving like billionaires. Right. Which is, I find that resentful, but at the same time, I get it because it's part of the marketing. I get it. I understand it.
I remember when I left the UK in the 80s, early 80s, before then, it was always around the Christmas period, would always be, because by then cigarette advertising had stopped on UK TV, but cigars were allowed.
Yeah.
And it was always, it used to be Hamlet with some sort of really cheesy, a bit of music.
The mild cigar. Hamlet, the mild cigar.
The mild cigar, and the idea, of course, would be around the Christmas period, after your Christmas dinner, that you'd light up this Hamlet, and it used to be a gift as well. I can remember when my father was smoking cigarettes. We kind of scraped up our pocket money and bought him a tin of Hamlets for Christmas.
There we go.
Because it's. Because then he had cigars to smoke. What they tasted like, God only knows, but it was
with you.
Yeah, I would imagine. But again, very aspirational, and again around this, linking, as with most things to do with lifestyle or an experience.
But see, I
Next
think in the United
Christmas.
States, it's a little different because when I go, like if I go to my chemist up the street and buy cigars from him, or I buy them online, depending, because being Jewish, I go for the best price.
So,
Sorry.
Stephen, can you go?
But-
Stephen, go back to your
yeah.
chemist. What do you mean by what, a drugstore? Or?
Very interesting. Very
right.
interesting.
So back in the day, you buy your tobacco, what they would call a chemist. And so I call my tobaccoist a chemist because I'm back still in the 1800s. So I go to my chemist, which is the tobacco store, and I buy. But when I go in there,
sorry, Stephen, the tobacco store, does he just only sell tobacco?
Oh yeah, it's so they'll have humidors, which is things you keep your cigars in. They
That's
have
just
cigars.
a store.
It's a
with
store for.
cigars,
It's a
nothing-
cigar shop. All it is a cigar shop. All they have is you name it. They have a stick from every brand, or if they can get it or they can't. But whether I'm in New York or Austin or Florida or anywhere else in the United States, and I go into a chemist, people that smoke, I notice at the cigar shop, they could be a guy literally, like I said, the Montana story that makes $100 a week, or a guy that makes $1 billion a year. Here, it's not so much look at me smoking. Now, I'm at certain parties you go to, people are trying to show off. But when you're at like the chemist and you're sitting there in the big leather couch and you guys are watching sports together or whatever, it's more of that camaraderie of, we're having a stick together, we're having a cigar together. Then they're trying to be anything, because the guys that are at these places, unless you're going to like the Havana Club where you actually have to dress up, most of these places, they're in a pair of shorts. They're in a t-shirt. They got a baseball cap on. They look like we look right now, right? There's no one's trying to be, and nobody cares. Once again, if I go and buy, an Oliva V for $20, if you will, or I buy a CAO Brazilian Amazon for $5, they don't care. Or if I go buy a Davidoff for 50, nobody cares because they're there.
It's the getting together. That
correct. Right. It's
and
nothing
we've
about.
All got a
whatever.
little fire at the end of our mouths.
Correct.
That we're all in control of, and we're going to sit together and we're going to chat together.
And
you
that's
said
it.
something very interesting. You said something really interesting. You go to the chemist, and that's sort of like your, as you say, your old world term.
Right.
One thing I've noticed here is, up until about 10 years ago, you could go into any newsagent, and here normally the newsagent is also the tobacconist, is also the place where you can get some sort of like basics and like shampoo and things like that.
Right.
And they would sell cheap cigars. Newsagents tend not to sell any cigars anymore.
Oh, wow.
They've kind of disappeared. So if you want a half decent cigar, either you're going to order it online or you're going to go to your slightly expensive cigar shop or humidor in town to buy your cigars. So that main cheap cigar, that the Hamlets that David was talking about, the mild cigar, the Hamlets, and there was a couple of other brands, Villiger cigars, if you remember, they were machine pressed cigars from Germany. You can't get them anymore unless you order them online.
Right. So
that style has changed.
When you guys do cigars in the UK, so I know in the States, we have many options, right? And if I punch in cigars, I will get 9,000 wholesalers. And then every chemist has you can order online from them. And so in the UK, is it that way where you can order, you guys can get Cubans there as well. So when you guys punch in, like, I want to buy cigars online, do you get tons and tons, or is it like a handful because really you have all these different chemists that are all around?
There is a much there is a heightened awareness specifically about the Cuban cigars. There's a lot of fakes. There's a lot of fakes on the market. So in terms of trusted online retailers, I mean, I know maybe 5 or 6. I can mention Havana House, and you've got JJ Fox, which is the oldest cigar merchant in the UK. All the Cuban cigars in this country are imported by one importer. That's Hunters and Frankel. There's a bit of a monopoly on that.
Right.
So you tend to go through these trusted. There's another one called Cigars Limited. You go through those trusted retailers who tend to actually have shops,
in the city.
Shops.
Right.
You tend to go through that. There might be 1 or 2 wholesalers that or importers that don't, but you go through the trusted one, and they're really good. I'll order 5 or 6 cigars or a sampling selection. A day or 2 later, it'll be with me. And I'm fortunate enough, I live in North London, 15-20 minutes. I'm in the West End. I can go and pick up cigars from Selfridges or Harrods or JJ Fox or wherever it is. It's no big deal. It's not a big problem. The USA, in terms of Instagram, the number of direct messages I get from buy cigars from us, buy cigars from us, buy cigars from us. It's a very vibrant industry, seemingly.
Yes.
But not Cubans. And then that in itself, as you very well know, Stephen, is another discussion. Cuban cigars versus New World cigar, which is, it polarizes people, and at the same time, I find it really funny. Actually, there is some merit to it. Cuban cigars there's something about them.
Well, I think part of it for the people in the United States, and I've had both, and I've been very fortunate, and I've had the very limited releases, and I've had the special. I've had them, and I've been very lucky. And I will say that there's and I don't know, it's almost like there's a sweetness to it.
Yeah,
when you smoke a Cuban cigar, and I'm not listen. All this Davidoff, love Davidoffs. Like mine's the Year of the Tiger. I've got like 100 Year of the Tigers because I plan to live a long time and smoke one every 12 years. But it's like I have the Year of the Tiger. I've got all. I love the Davidoffs. I love the ones that I everybody. But there's just something about a Cuban cigar, even the worst Cuban cigar, that it still has a sweetness to it. And there's just something about it that makes it taste just a little better. And it's not the mystique of it being a Cuban cigar, but it is just, there's something to it. It could be the soil, it's the people, whatever, the love they put into it. I don't know, but that's a whole nother show, because there's such an array of Cuban cigars. And then what they do is they make an American, like Cohiba has a version that they just make in the Dominican for the Americans, because we can't get technically Cohibas. But now
I've been to the farms where the tobacco is being grown for the Cohiba Red Dot.
Oh, okay.
I have something quite unique. I can show it to you.
Cool.
I have a Red Dot box.
Very nice.
An unfinished Red Dot box, because normally they stamp Cohiba on this.
Right.
I had this taken off the production line and presented to me. I mean, when I said I had it, I told them, can you take it off the production line and give it to me? Because I want a unique Cohiba box.
Right.
So they gave it to me. This Cohiba is not, other than in name, to be compared with a Cuban Cohiba.
Correct.
And if I may be so bold to suggest, the difference between Cuban cigars and non-Cuban cigars, for me, is there's this earthy woodland autumn feel that you get in that cigar. There is a layer of taste and aroma. Very specifically, it's an aroma thing. If I smoke a Cuban cigar in my lounge, it smells outstanding to me, to my palate. And I always pair it up. I'll wear a nice cologne. It goes back to, again, smell memories. I'll wear a nice cologne. There's a nice smell that's left. I don't mind the smell of, I enjoy the smell of cigars on my clothes. It's something I like. There's a deep, richy manliness to that in the nicest way possible. And I personally don't understand when people say, oh, no, I can't stand the smell of cigars. And I think that's just a fashionable thing to say, actually. Actually, it's quite a nice smell, actually. It's sort of a purging kind of smell in a spiritual sense.
Yes.
But no, Cuban cigars, there is definitively something about the way those cigars are put together. If we could compare it to wine, it's the terroir, if you like, the soil that grows those leaves has put something in those leaves.
Yep.
And I don't think that's a magic trick. I don't think that's marketing. The marketing is disproportionate, takes it to a totally different level.
Correct.
But there is something to be said for it.
But it's funny though, because people in America, they'll be like, oh my God, Cuban cigars. I'm like, calm down. Like, have you had a Cuban cigar? I can give you the website of 5 legitimate companies that can literally get you Cuban cigars in America. They'll send them to you in America. It goes through customs. They know they're coming. It's not a big deal because we get so many. I said, we've all had them. I said, but they're like, oh, there's so much. I'm like, it's only better because you can't get them. But there still is a mystique to it, which is good. But the flavor, the construction is always, I find, better than the Dominican. And I'm talking about 0.001%. You can just tell. But I keep telling people, if we could get Cubans in America, just say tomorrow Biden goes, Cuban cigars in America are going to be here. Okay. Within 6 months, they're going to be just like everybody else. It's I had a Cuban. Oh, good for you. But because you can't, when someone says they've had a Cuban or someone says, would you like one? Everybody, they start, it's do you want to drive a Bugatti or do you want to drive the Ford Explorer? I want to
Yeah.
drive the Bugatti. It's the same type of thing, right? Once everybody drives the Bugatti, they're gonna be like, oh, it's a car. Yeah, no kidding. It has 4 tires. It goes boom, boom, boom.
It's still
It's
metal and plastic and
right,
a bit of carbon, and that's what it
right.
is.
And a cigar is the same thing. It's just made somewhere different, and it's still a beautiful. Cigars and cars and scotch to me, they're all like a work of art because an artisan had to create it.
Yeah,
You know, and
absolutely.
that's how I look at it.
It's the engineering behind it.
Correct.
If you delve into the engineering behind a cigar, I mean, I think fortunately, based on life experiences, I've been to tobacco farms, I've been to cigar rolling factories, I've spoken with owners of cigar companies.
Right.
That immersion into the culture is genuinely, anyone who smokes a cigar should immerse themselves in that culture, because then they'll appreciate more the cigar or stick or stogie, however you want to call it, that they're smoking. You impart a much more sense of importance and well-being and a sense of understanding. You're better educated. Picking up a cigar and smoking, if you don't know what a cigar is, every cigar is going to taste horrible or nice to you. It doesn't, that's just based on personal preference. But back to the Cuban thing, in London, I would think virtually everyone really just smokes Cuban cigars because they're accessible.
Right.
And it's the New World cigars that people are they pull their nose up at, and it's relatively less expensive activity. But it's I think it's contextual more than anything else. It's also to me, it still goes back to that box of cigars in my father's cabinet that I can't have, so I want to have it.
Right. I agree with you 100%. And going back to something else you just said, which is you got to like immerse yourself. So in the States, technically you can go to Cuba. It's a process. You're allowed to go. But not everybody's going to have access. So in Tampa, Florida is kind of where all the Cubans came and they made cigars there. So I've been to those factories. I've been to the ones in the Dominican. But I did something a few years back. I went to the Big Smoke that Cigar Aficionado has in the United States, right? And they have classes on
Las Vegas.
cigars.
That's Las Vegas.
That's in Las Vegas, and then they had one in New York, and I think they're trying to branch out. But the one in Vegas is just, it's Vegas, you got to go. But the nice thing is, not only do you get samples and whatever, but if you go in the morning, they'll have like steak and eggs and scotch and cigars, but then they'll have a class on how you make a cigar.
Yeah.
And you can roll a cigar. And I was like, this is awesome. And then here in Austin, which is interesting, there are a couple of local cigar guys that, they age their leaves or they buy them, whoever they're fiber, and they have cigar rollers make cigars in their shops. So you can ask questions and watch. And so for people that are getting into it, that's half the process. Like, a gearhead knows how a car is made from the ground up. So guys that are really into cigars, you have to understand the construction and the leaf and what everything really means. Because if you don't, you roll up a newspaper. It's the same thing.
I mean, just the basic things. Many people who smoke cigars don't necessarily appreciate that actually in a decent quality cigar, which are most cigars, these are full leaves that run the length of a cigar.
Correct.
And they run in a certain direction so that the flavor improves from the foot to the head of the cigar. Right. So that when you're actually, the intensity of the oils in the leaf is increasing as you're smoking the cigar. So, and that also is based on the quality of the leaf. So some people will puff through a cigar and get really sick at the end of it. They don't realize that the intensity of the cigar is continuously increasing. So you have to like a little bit slow down and pace yourself and have a drink or eat some chocolate or have a coffee. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting things if you immerse yourself. As you said, a gearhead will know the construction of a car. A petrol head might just be the person who enjoys driving his cars.
Right.
And there is a great deal of difference. Shazad, who you had on with the brown car guy, who spoke about cars, he will know his car from ground all the way up, including the history, including the brand. And his level of appreciation, and therefore the way he imparts that information, will hopefully increase the enjoyment that you have when you watch his stuff. Right. So when it comes to any activity, scotch, cigars, food, the more educated you are, and social media does this really well, you can educate yourself about things 20 years ago that you couldn't.
Right.
So that's really the fun part of it. When you get involved in this industry, it's not about, oh, don't smoke. Smoking is bad for you. It's not about that. It's smoking substances has been around as long as humans have existed. I mean, ancient Greek times, they would invoke the Greek gods by eating magic mushrooms and smoking magic, all that kind of stuff. And the whole point of smoking tobacco, depending on whose history you read, was to get people together and then attain some spiritual connection with God, to get on a little bit of a spiritual high. And I hope that is a really good reason to do something like this, notwithstanding the fact that if anyone doesn't want to be around cigar smoke, they don't have to be.
That's true. And well, it's very funny. A friend of mine, when I go to his house for dinner, after dinner we will have cigars, and he has, and I found out why because I asked. And he has silk smoking jackets. You
Wonderful.
You put on your silk smoking jacket. You go into his little, cigar heaven, and you'll smoke your cigar. And I said to him, "Why are we wearing silk?" He goes, "Because silk is the only material that repels cigar smoke." He said, "So when you leave," he says, "you still smell like cigars, but you don't. Your clothing may not smell like your pants will, but your jacket, like your shirt." And so I thought that was very cool. So he's very old school, and he's like my age. So he goes back to, like he said, he goes back to the 18th century where it was an art of smoking a cigar. But no, it's just one of those things. Like I told David, I said, "David, this show could literally be 3 hours or 4 hours long," because when I watched Kirby talk to the Davidoff guys in London, I could tell that they edited a whole bunch out because the older gentleman had 10,000 stories, which is phenomenal. And it's just
Edward Sahakian is literally everybody's uncle.
Yes.
Is the kind of uncle you want to sit down with, and he will just narrate and the storyteller, and they're all interesting, and you hang on his work. I have that Noam Chomsky moment with him where I've got to listen to what this person is saying, because the intellectual capital in terms of convening people around cigar smoking, the stories that come up, and then the sartorial discussions, and what shoes are you wearing, and what watch are you wearing, and why are you doing this? It's beginning to become a bit of a lost world.
Yes. Conversation's a bit of a lost world, because today for social media, it's like we have a TikTok page. Everybody has a TikTok page, right? But everything's like a minute. So for people to actually take, whether it's the podcast or the video part of what we do, and to spend an hour and actually listen and enjoy it and say, "Oh, that was interesting," is a lot of work. Because even now with Netflix and whatever, like I know we go to a movie and my stepson will be like, "I wish we could just fast forward through this part." I'm like, "Seriously?" It's like, this is the movie. You're supposed to enjoy it. And we've become this world of no, instead of
attention span world.
Yeah.
And here, this is about an hour and a half smoke. Now, if I'm smoking with other people, that's an hour and a half of attention in a very relaxed way that you have with people from different backgrounds, as you said, the street hustler all the way up to the billionaire.
Right.
It's not age centric. It's not ethnicity centric. It's not religious centric. And yet people can have common discussions about spirituality, art, fashion. These are what were called in the old world symposiums.
Right.
So a symposium is when you sit down and you utter one word of poetry, it becomes a symposium. It's you're basically all spiritually connected in one way or another, and you're discussing and chatting as people used to sit around dinner tables, families used to sit around dinner tables. You're now doing this with people who you could possibly learn something from. Maybe you can impart your own experiences on them. It's a wonderful convener.
It is. And unfortunately, it's a dying art. And so when I do hang out with friends, when we smoke cigars, it's like, this is going to be a 1 to 2 hour mini holiday, and it's going to be great because there's never a rush. People, and sometimes in meetings, people I know will get mad at me. They're like, "Why do you bring a cigar? Why are you smoking it?" It's like, because it's for the pause, it's for the tension, and it makes me think, because I have a cigar in my mouth. I can't speak. That would be rude. And they're like, it's just one of those, it's everything. You can use it for whatever you want. And for me, like I said, it's a nice 1 to 2 hour mini holiday.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't care. Don't take my phone with me. If I do, it's just to listen to music. Don't read any. It's whatever I need it to be for that 1 or 2 hours. And I think it's a dying art because people are in such a hurry to do absolutely nothing, and they
Yeah.
miss enjoying life. And
The
I think the cigar makes you
conviviality
do
of
that.
it, the conviviality is if you get the right people together, or
Yep.
it doesn't have to be the right people. You can learn something from anyone on
Correct.
the planet. I will say one thing to you, and you were speaking earlier on about it doesn't matter if you've got an $8 stick or a $500 stick, people will
Right.
get together. One of the things I really, really enjoy is when you have 3 or 4 people sitting together and they're smoking the same cigar,
Yep.
and you're marinating in the same aroma with the same experience. I really, for some reason, I really enjoy that. So there's an intense. If I'm smoking a Partagas and everyone else is smoking the same Partagas D4, you've got that same aroma. I don't know. It's the same frequency that everyone's on, perhaps.
Right.
And there is a trust me, there's a great benefit to that, and everyone's drinking the same drink as well. So when we go to cigar sampling evenings here in the UK, which are quite prevalent, do you have those in the US?
50-50, not as much as you would think. You know who has a lot of them? Davidoff. So you have to fly to we go back and forth between Austin and New York. So when I'm in New York and they have a cigar night, I'm there.
Yeah.
So, but everyone at that point, you're right, is smoking the same cigar, the same scotch, the same this, the same that.
Yeah, and people will smile at each other.
Yep.
People will literally, you don't know this person, oh, that's nice, and that it just stirs good feelings, good vibrations, and it's like a group of. I like to think I'm into the cars as well, but you got 3 friends all driving a Ferrari. There's a shared experience,
right?
If you know what I mean. It has that sort of communal feeling, and that's really whether it's the cigars that bring you to that or not, but cigars do bring you to that,
right?
Because you're forced to sit down in some sense and put your head back and relax, and that is perhaps, regardless of what suit you're wearing or shorts you're wearing, regardless of where you're from, that is a beautiful spiritual activity, which I think is lost many of the times in other scenarios.
Yeah, I like it when I'm in New York smoking a cigar and I'll pass a guy with a cigar, and it's like you said, it's that nod. It's like it'd be totally different, or his aroma I could tell much different from mine. They both nod, and you go. But what's really interesting about cigar people is I always carry my little cigar thing in my suit or jacket or whatever I'm wearing. And if someone says they like my cigar, I have no problem. I did this. I gave some guy a cigar and he looked at me. I'm like, it's okay. You can, it's all right. Yeah. And he was sort of like shocked. And then I went on, Rob Report had this experience that we went on out of Miami once on a boat, or I should say a yacht. And I remember this guy was smoking a cigar and he goes, I really like your cigar. So I pull it and I'm like, here. And he's looking at me like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, it's a cigar. I'm gifting you the cigar. And he looked at me like, why? I go, I don't want anything from you. I'm saying, how long have you been smoking cigars? And he's like, a newbie. And I'm like, dude, this is what people do. It's a stick. It's a cigar. You give. This is the whole premise of it. And he just looked at me and I'm like, thinking to myself, dude, you need to learn some etiquette. Because I've been to cigar conventions where people just, if you tried this here, and it's like no big deal whether it's an $8 or £8 or 50 or 500 here. It's like they want you to enjoy what they're enjoying.
Exercise. How is that about? It's a beautiful exercise. It's showing a little bit of love to someone you've never met. Correct. Just on the basis of, hey, hang on, there is a communal activity here. Yeah. And in a very sort of isolationist world, that's a good thing. It is a good thing. There is an upside to it. It may have some downsides. It may have some. I quite frankly, some things I do. Political correctness aside, right? Winston Churchill smoked 20 cigars a day.
He's my idol.
George Burns. I think there's a YouTube snippet of him saying, I smoke 20 cigars a day. Right. And these people living to ripe old ages. Winston Churchill drank, I think, 2 bottles of champagne a day, for example. Now, these may be not necessarily good role models in terms of health, but these people survived a long time.
Right.
And I'm not advocating anything, but come on, there is
Something
one has
to
to
it.
think, one has to use one's brain, one has to a little bit, everything in moderation. 20 cigars a day is maybe not a good idea, maybe, but everything in moderation in life. I mean, some things in life require mixers, because if you drank meat, if you drank meat, it would be too much.
Right.
So moderate everything.
But that's so funny. When I go for my annual physical and I go see my cardiologist, all these people, get to like over 50, like you said, you got to go see 57 doctors. It's a religious thing. And plus the health company here has to make money. And and I still work out and do my running and whatever I need to do to stay in shape. But my doctor will be like, you have no, he goes like, and my doctor hates this because he'll be like, what's your secret again? I go, Scotch and Cigars, doc. And he's like, why you're not dead, I don't know. I go, neither do I. But like, there's no clogging here. I have no stress. Even my wife will be like, when I get stressed.
The other S, Scotch, cigars, and steak. I really like that one. That's the one I'm taking away from this conversation.
There you go.
Scotch,
And please enjoy. Yeah. So next time I'm in the UK, we'll go for Scotch, cigars, and steak. But I mean, and we'll bring brown car guy because we gotta go. We'll send pictures to David because
by the way, you always need someone sitting in the corner like brown car guy going.
That's David. We could take David then. They could both be doing that. But no, it's really one of those things. It's the enjoyable art of it. Like I said, if you may not appreciate a cigar, you may appreciate a car or a scotch, but it's the art. And I think that's what's lost on a lot of people. I know there's a documentary somewhere on YouTube. The guy it's like 2 hours long, but it's all about the Davidoff in the Dominican and how they make cigars from A to Z. And I was like, I think I've watched it 10 times. And I'm just like, my wife is like, you've seen that. I go, I know, but every time I see it, I pick up something new.
Education.
And I think they miss that. So I don't know. I like it. Anyway, David's going to tell me it's time that we have to wrap this up. So before he does, I'm going to do it. We'd love to have you back if you would like, but we're going to run our ending. And then after our ending, if you stay with us for a few seconds, we'll go over some housekeeping chores, and then that's it.
God bless you both.
Oh, thank you, my friend.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being on. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It wasn't really a show for me today, but it was fascinating listening, and I hope everybody else has been as fascinated as I have. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Rod, stay with us a few seconds, and we'll go over some housekeeping stuff. Everybody, subscribe, like, tell your friends, enjoy a cigar. So, what can I tell you? This takes 30 seconds. Oh, here comes the good stuff. This is where David does the voiceover with all the cool caricatures.
Well, sadly, this is the end of today's show. A really big thank you to everyone who contributed today to the show. And of course, thank you to my co-host, Stephen Oldfart. I'm David Oldfart. Don't forget, subscribe to the show and get all the latest updates from Two Old Farts Making Noises.